So welcome to Mentor Monday. My name is Darrell Smith, and I'm a DMA graduating student in December for Jazz Studies there at Stony Brook University. Um, I have the pleasure of being with Mr. Ray Anderson today. Ray Anderson is the head of jazz faculty, or the head of jazz education, or the jazz department at Stony Brook University. I've never done an interview before, so we'll see how this goes. To give you some insight on Ray Anderson, he's a Chicago-born trombone player. He moved to New York City in the 1970s. He's played with esteemed musicians like Anthony Braxton, Dr. John, Charlie Hayden, Sam Rivers, and George Russell, just to name a few. He's recorded several dozens of albums with his original bands, those being the Slickophonics, the Pocket Brass Band, Bass Drum Bone, and the Alligatory Band. He's been noted in Downbeat magazine as one of the most premier trombonists in New York City in the 1980s and 1990s, and he's been working at Stony Brook since 2003. I'd like to welcome my guest, Mr. Ray Anderson.
Thank you. Thanks, Darrell. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for being here, Ray.
Yeah.
So on Mentor Monday, I've seen lots of people giving interviews with some of their mentors, and it's been a pleasure having you as a mentor the last 2 years during my tenure at Stony Brook. It's been an eye-opening experience working with such an esteemed musician as yourself. And I wanted to get into some questions about you, just so the people at Stony Brook know who you are. So I kind of stumbled with it before, but what is your official title at Stony Brook University?
Okay, my official title is Director of Jazz Studies. And this always affords me the opportunity to point out that I am also the one and only jazz professor at Stony Brook. So the director of jazz studies is directing this guy, Ray Anderson. So I'm always telling myself to get to work. Come on, Ray, get to work. You know, the directors, it's not as if I have this huge staff that I'm directing, you know, I'm it basically. Although now, since this year, I do have an assistant faculty member. Tom Manuel is teaching also here at Stony Brook. So that's been absolutely wonderful.
Nice. And Tom, for the people at home, Tom is a Stony Brook graduate himself. So he got his DMA at Stony Brook University and is the chairperson at the Jazz Loft.
Yeah, he's the founder and the president of the Jazz Loft
right
here in Stony Brook. So, yeah.
And what's that relationship been like for you with Tom?
Oh, that's been wonderful. That's been just a wonderful relationship. I've been so blessed with students. Like all my students have been just really wonderful people to work with. It's been an amazing experience for me. When I first started in '03, I had no graduate students. I just taught the undergraduates who wanted to do something with jazz, and I interacted with anybody in the classical department who wanted to play jazz. So we played jazz with them. I taught jazz to them. But it wasn't until, I guess, '06, '07, '08, somewhere in there that I actually had people coming to the university to be students of mine. So there started to be a jazz studio of which you and Tom are graduates, and that's just been wonderful. That's really fun.
And on average, how many jazz graduate students are there per year?
Graduates, about two. One
Wow.
or two. Yeah, it's a really small. There's usually 6 or 7 that are involved. That number does vary a good bit.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I get 4 new people, sometimes I just get 2 new people, so that it fluctuates. But usually we have some 6 or 7 folks who are then all playing together, which is wonderful. That's what makes it work.
So then the beauty of that, and what I found in the beauty of that as a student of yours, is there's a real intimacy that you get to develop with each student. and you really get to know each student and really bring out the best in each of them.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, that's what's so much fun. It's
Yeah.
great. It's great hanging out with you guys. It's great.
Um, so that brings me to my next question. So, um, what challenges have arose being a jazz professor in a predominantly classical based music department here at Stony Brook?
Well, the good thing is that this music department does not erect the barriers that many, many music departments do raise. So there's no jealousy between the jazz and the classical. There isn't a, competition for funds or support. Like everybody in the department is very, very supportive of my endeavors, and I've never had any problem with that. We share students, back and forth. So that really has not been a conflict for me at all. And of course, the size of the department, the tiny size of the department is both a blessing and a curse, I guess you could say, because since there's so few of us, we're not able to offer jazz theory and jazz. I can't give people lessons, especially undergraduates. That's a drag. I can't give somebody saxophone lessons, or it depends on who I have as a TA, what lessons I can give to undergraduates in any given year. So you, as you well know,
Yeah.
because you were a brilliant TA and gave all kinds of lessons to drummers and ran those groups and stuff. But a bigger department would afford more possibilities in that way. But I don't mind. I mean, to me, it works really well. And I can't say there's really conflicts at all. I'm very happy in this department.
Beautiful. With Tom coming on as your what would you call him? I guess your
He's an associate professor. And what is he? I don't know his title either. He's more than an adjunct. I think he's less than an associate. And I don't know I don't know these terms, but I will say this: it's wonderful having Tom there.
right. So with Tom as, let's say, your understudy of the department, he do you hope in the future that the department can grow as the faculty almost grows a little bit? So like there's you, there's Tom, maybe like there could be one more professor, and then maybe
Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd love to see that happen.
that'd be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
And then,
that'd be lovely.
and then have it flourish into a dual classical program and jazz program there at Stony Brook, because I know a lot of
Yeah,
people that I'm friends with are really interested in coming to Stony Brook to study jazz with you. So
great. Send them over here. Yeah, and we do have people who study both.
right.
We have people who get classical lessons from good classical faculty and participate in the jazz thing and do both, and that works really well. It's great.
Well, that leads me into my next question. Um, have you done some cross-pollinating between the classical program and the jazz program?
Oh yeah, yeah. For all these years, every year I teach a course in improvisation, which is not jazz. It's not jazz improvisation. It's pure, in a way, improvisation. We use no music and we have no parameters on what will be played. So it's investigating sound and how we can make meaningful music instantaneously just by listening to ourselves and everybody else. So this class is fascinating for me, and this is where I've really honed my philosophy of what actually does make music work. So there's typically a jazz person or two in the class, and the rest of the class is classical folks. So it doesn't make any difference in this class if you've ever improvised or not. In fact, sometimes it's better if you never have, because it's like fresh ground. and it's just fascinating, that class. It's wonderful to see people from the classical department who are virtuosic,
Mhm.
and once I get them to turn loose a little bit, and get away from the paper and realize that they can just play. It's amazing things happen in there. So that's an ongoing pleasure of the whole thing.
So with the classical musicians that are in that class, I know the jazz musicians are used to improvising because that's a main part of what happens in jazz music. But with the classical students that join that class, are they reluctant to the letting go of the paper and like getting into some of the actual improvising?
Yeah, that's my whole job, is to figure out how to open everybody up, how to open people up, how we can all get out of our own way,
Yeah,
because it's really what we've somehow come to absorb and believe about ourselves and believe about music and think is the right way to play, and being really careful not to make a mistake, and all of this is a hindrance to creative improvisation.
yeah,
So a lot of the class is focused on sort of returning to how you felt when you were a little kid and you just saw a drum set and you ran over there and started banging on the drums and you were having a great time,
yeah,
and that energy, so you take that energy and you bring it to your bassoon, and see what else can be done with a bassoon that they didn't teach you,
right.
and yeah, it's that, yeah, it's really fun. It's a wonderful experience, and the music that comes out of it is quite amazing and beautiful, because since we do it for a semester, this thing evolves. It is a band, and it evolves, and that's quite rewarding, to hear that.
It's really interesting that you say that because I just had a son, as you know, and he's only 5 months old. But one of his favorite things to do during the day is sit at the piano with me. So like
Ah,
he loves when we sit down at the piano and like he just like sits there. And, like it's not really like hard hitting yet, but like he definitely knows that he's like touching something and getting an immediate reaction from the piano. So he loves that.
yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And obviously he doesn't know what he's doing, but he definitely goes. He's like, oh, and he enjoys sound like that. So
Yeah, he's exploring. Yeah, and that's a lot of we need to get people to explore
right.
in this course, because you work so hard to get technique that you kind of forget certain aspects of music, you know.
So that leads me into another question. So if you had a chance to talk to some of the classical musicians that join the school that are reluctant to get into improv, what would you say to them directly since you have this platform right now?
I'd say give it a chance.
Hmm.
And I would say also that where music is going now, as if we think about what music will sound like when you graduate and what work you might find yourself called upon to do or wanting to be able to be equipped to do, you have to know something about improvisation. You have to be able to improvise. A musician now in this time who can only play what's written, no matter what, is really limited. And as part of your education, I think it's absolutely essential that you have some ease with improvisation and are not intimidated by it, and can do it and have some experience doing it. And I would say the same thing is absolutely true about jazz and African American music. If you get in an orchestra, there's going to be an African American composer show up who's going to use things from the African American tradition in that piece, that symphony or whatever. And you'll be in much better shape if you have some concept of how that music works, how it feels, if you've played some, if you've listened to some. I just feel like to be a complete musician now in this day and age, you have to know some jazz. That's America's music. You're in America, you know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You have to know something about this whole African American tradition and jazz and how that's influenced all the classical kids. And you have to be able to improvise. I think it's absolutely essential. And in that sense, of course, it'd be better if the department was bigger, because I can't teach. There's 200 DMAs or something. I can't teach them all myself,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
But that's what I would say. I said, this is important. You want to prepare yourself for a life in music. You definitely need to know something about these two things. These are central and becoming more central.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah.
Um,
That's my spiel.
that's so. Circling back to some of the classes that you've taught at Stony Brook, what's been some of your favorite classes to teach?
Well, that improvisation class is nearly the favorite, just because of the transformation that I see in people, and that kind of opening up of new ground to folks. So I would put that very, very high on the list. But um, but what would be a close second is the classes that are now the assembly of the graduate students.
Mhm.
So sometimes there's two small groups, sometimes there's one group. But what we do in those groups is we're essentially in a band together. And I'm nominally the band leader, but really it's functioning like a band. So everybody has to compose music, because to become a real jazz musician at this point, you have to be able to write some stuff for yourself. And so we bring in our tunes and we work on our tunes. It's it's what I do professionally. You know, like when I hire people from my band, I'm looking for people who can play whatever I write, but who can also immediately interpret what I write,
Mhm.
so that they bring something to it.
Right.
And then say like, Ray, well, what if we did this? You know, or what if I played this figure like this instead? You know, or what if we repeated that section instead of going on? That's that's the process, because jazz is always a collective endeavor, you know. So I'm teaching that by doing it. It's just like these folks are in my band and I'm in their band. And so there we go. It's fun.
I
Yeah.
think I think it's beautiful that you're so open to interpretation of your music, because I know a lot of musicians, jazz musicians and non-jazz musicians alike, that aren't open to interpretation. Like they were like, I wrote it like this, and this is how it should be. And
Yeah.
if you don't play it like that, they get upset. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so having that open mind that music is ever flowing is a beautiful concept, and that I've really appreciated
Thank
during
you.
my time
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Going back, so leaving school for a second and just kind of focusing on you for a second,
Mhm.
how's the pandemic affected your playing and your teaching?
Well, the pandemic is perfectly horrible,
Yeah.
as everyone knows. So this isn't news. And I've had a number of tours canceled. And tours at this point in my life is where I actually get my physical chops into the condition that they need to be in to allow me to really express what I'm where I'm at this point. So chops are way down,
Yeah.
and that's frustrating, because you know I can practice, but practicing isn't it. Performing is it.
Yeah.
Performing is where the teeth get cut, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can shoot a lot of free throws, but until you're trying to shoot free throws in the game
Yeah.
with the game on the line, it's not the same practice. Now, it's good to practice a lot of those, you know, but until you've got it down to where, you know what I mean? It's like, until you're in the game, you're just practicing.
Right.
So it's rough not having gigs.
Yeah.
And everybody I know says the same thing. You
Yeah.
know, it's hard. This is harder, I think, on musicians than on nearly any other profession, because the computer doesn't allow us to play together. We try all these programs, we're using them,
Yeah.
we're doing what we can do with them, but it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
There's always lag, there's always latency, as they call it. So that that makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're hoping that, you know, things keep marching on with technology of vaccines and fast COVID tests, and that we can reopen. It's an open question right now whether in the spring I'll be able to have classes in person at the university or not. We're still sort of just right on the edge of, you know, we're going to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any sort of playing opportunity coming up? Or are you performing anywhere? Are you doing anything like socially distanced and anything at all?
Yeah, I am playing. We're doing some things with the jazz loft,
Cool.
you know. In fact, you're on some of them.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
playing on something, right? We're doing some outside things. We did a bunch of outside pop-up concerts with a sort of trad jazz lineup of, you know, trumpet, clarinet, trombone. I'm playing sousaphone in
Cool.
that, and we went marching around the community and just popped up at places and played a little bit so as not to draw a crowd. We just play a tune or two and then leave and go somewhere else and play a tune. So it's just for whoever's already out there. Now that's not really going to work in the change of the season,
Yeah.
but we do have some stuff in December where we'll be out in a tent with heaters on, and, you know, but open air, you know, and we'll see how that goes. Tom has been great about thinking of ways to somehow keep this alive. So there's been some activity at the Jazz Loft in spite of the, you know, we can't open it, but, you know,
Right.
it's been, you know, there's a few things going on. And I have a little pod of people, like many people do, of close friends that I really trust, who are really, really careful.
Right.
And so, you know, it's like, okay, so come on over and we'll play.
Right.
You know, I have like just a couple people where it's like, okay, you know, we have ongoing, just get together and play.
Well, Ray, this has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I've known all these things about you already, but having
Mm.
the rest of the Stony Brook community get to know you a little bit. I hope that you
Yeah.
have a wonderful, safe Halloween, because today is Halloween day,
Yep.
and I look forward to getting to play some music with you once all this is over. You know.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's been a great pleasure talking to you as always,
Yes, sir.
Darrell. Wonderful. Yeah.
Cool. All right,
Yeah.
y'all. Well, that's it. Mentor Monday, Ray Anderson.
Okay.
Check him
Mentor
out.
Monday. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.